Well, every parent wants the smartest kid in class, right? Well, this morning we have an expert here who's going to show you the exact phases to take your child through so that they can read and write from an early age with confidence. Richard Gentry is here. He's the author of Raising Confident Children. Dr. Richard Gentry, good morning.
Thank you. Good morning.
Good. A lot of
Glad
stuff to get to. Glad to have you. I want to start because some of these statistics were quite surprising. Tell us what they show, the stats show.
The stats show that we absolutely have to begin early, during the critical period of the young child's brain development, to begin to lay the foundational circuitry for reading. Bridget, get this statistic. Parents who start reading early and talking early with their kids give their kids a 32 million word advantage by the time the children are 3 years of age. By the time these kids are in first grade, they have vocabularies of 13,000 words. By the time they're in fourth grade, these kids who were read to and talked to earlier have higher intelligence and better grades in reading, writing, and spelling.
And consequently, once they go to the classroom, they're further advanced than a lot of their classmates.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Now, one of the things that you point out is you say while children don't need to read independently, they must be prepared to succeed at having an appreciation for things like storytelling and familiarity with other things.
That's part of what's happening. That's part of the brain circuitry that's being laid from the very beginning. It even starts right at birth with the baby exploring the book with his or her mouth. Soon after, the baby will be turning pages. So early start, having fun with books, it's all a positive experience for kids.
So now talk about the dictionary in the child's brain.
Well, it's very interesting. It's really the spelling dictionary. And when we look at the phases, we're seeing kids go through phases of learning how to spell. And ultimately, what needs to happen, right here on the left side, just behind the ear, is a word form area. And if I hold up a word like Texas, in 250 milliseconds, your brain knows the meaning, the sound, and the expert spelling. So one of the things that points out to us is that spelling is critically important for early reading, but not only early reading, but for proficient reading once kids learn to read. Right.
Now, one of the things you touched on briefly is the benefits of talking and reading to your child aloud as opposed to, sending your child to the corner and saying, read a book.
Absolutely.
Talk about the advantages of that and what a big difference that makes.
Well, that's the thing that gives them that 32 million word advantage, because whenever parents are reading to kids or talking to them, their brain is processing language, and that language processing circuitry is so important to connect with the early reading circuitry.
Now, are there words that you can use, Dr. Gentry, to say a 5 or 6 year old that are too advanced? When you say the brain begins to develop language skills from birth, when should you start incorporating some of the larger words into a child's vocabulary?
Well, you see, that's one of the advantages of not just talking to kids, but reading aloud to them, because when you read to kids, you introduce unusual vocabulary. Words like giraffe or monkey, for example, in flip books when they're beginning to learn new words, it's such a positive advantage to them.
Now, what about story time? That's really the time in the evening when parents and children bond. Should you have a child give you the story back, or is it enough for them to process it once you give it to them the first time?
Oh, one of the advantages, or one of the brain-based parts of the brain-based formula for reading is repetition. So it's very important for parents to allow children to choose their favorite books and read those over and over and over from birth to age 3. For example, it's not unusual for a favorite book like Goodnight Moon to be read 300 times, but every time the child and parent share that book and talk about it, the baby's is benefiting from that, or toddler is benefiting from that.
What I love about your book is you talk about how to teach children to read and write from baby to age 7. Now, what if you are a parent who's tuning in and you have a child who's 10 or 11 who's not reading to their level?
Well, one of the tips that I would give to parents is to look in the child's book bag and see if there's a spelling book in that book bag, because spelling has been given short shrift in American education, and it's so important for that area C of the brain, the dictionary in the brain, that we continue to teach spelling. There's an evolving and extended research base for the importance of spelling for proficient reading and writing. So it's not only important for the early development, but for the 11, 12, and 13-year-old as well.
And yes, and one of the other things I want to ask before we go to commercial break is, how do you ensure that your child's curriculum at school is matching what you've tried to instill at home? How do you make sure you're both on the same wavelength?
Well, I think it's very important for parents to monitor their child's progress and be on the team with the folks at school. So parents need to be engaged with what's happening at school.
Fantastic, Dr. Gentry. You're not leaving us. Later in the show, we're going to tell you the 5 phases that will take your child from what Dr. Gentry likes to call a tadpole to a reading frog. The 5 absolutes that are going to help you develop children who are confident readers, smarter in class and doing better. Dr. Gentry, thank you for joining us. We'll see you later in the show. Welcome back, everybody. Well, this morning we've been talking with Richard Gentry. He's the author of Raising Confident Children, and so compelling the stuff is in this book that we thought, let's come back for a second half and talk about, if you're a parent, this is good stuff. There are 5 phases, pardon me, to raising confident readers, and we want to get right into those, Dr. Gentry, in case there's a parent at home right now watching saying, how can I turn my child into the smartest in the classroom? Let's start with phase 0. Reading aloud at birth to teaching children to write their name. Talk about that.
Phase 0 starts just after birth. 3 days, within 3 days, a child can recognize the mom's voice. At 4 months of age, children can respond to illustrations in books.
Wow.
Children need to start pencil and paper activity. The early exploration, smearing food, or developing muscles for later drawing and handwriting. And by 3 years of age, between 2 and 3, when children can actually write their name, they've really made reached an incredible milestone in terms of early literacy.
Okay, which brings us to phase 1, which you say time for ABCs. ABCs is a great time because it's not just reciting the ABCs, but there's a lot more to be gained from them. Well,
the interesting thing about the phases is we can actually track their development by seeing what children do in their writing. We can see how they are thinking about how the alphabet code works. And at phase 1, after they've learned to write their name, it's very interesting. They pretend to write things like a grocery list, but they don't yet recognize that letters correspond to sounds.
Gotcha.
So they'll have a grocery list, but you won't be able to read it because it'll be random. It'll look like random letters.
Gotcha, which brings us to phase 2, which is mapping letters to sounds.
Mapping letters to sounds, and the first letters that they generally map are the beginning sounds or prominent sounds, beginning and ending sounds. So you might see a picture of Humpty Dumpty and the spelling might look something like HMP, DMT.
Gotcha. Phase 3 is spelling with a letter for each sound. I see how this is all kind of woven in together.
Absolutely. Spelling for a letter for each sound is a huge, giant step forward, because for the first time you can read the child's writing. It's easy to read. You don't have to have the picture. A word like bird will be spelled B-R-D. A word, or they might write "Are you deaf?" as R-U-D-F. But you could read that.
And you could actually read it. And phase 4, the final phase, from chunking to chapter books.
Well, the problem with a letter for sound is that English doesn't work that way. So ultimately what has to happen is children move to the chunking phase. They spell a word like everywhere, ev, E-V, re, R-E, where, W-H, A-I-R. But the thing is, the chunk might not be the correct
Gotcha.
chunk, and that's why we need to continue with the teaching of spelling.
Dr. Gentry, that's a lot of good stuff. Of course, if you'd like to get a more compiled list of all these tips, Raising Confident Readers is where you get it. You can purchase this book at Amazon.com or go to raisingconfidentreaders.blogspot.com, Kens5.com. We just hope they can put the letters together, GDSA. Dr. Gentry, thank you so much.